me. And for those of you listening, hopefully I can help and give some tips on what I've learned along the way as a mother whilst working. So just wanted to share just a summary of myself. Obviously, as Anna shared, I work for Luxoft and I'm their HR director for Western and Southern Europe, but I also have a business role into being the global HR business partner for our banking and capital markets business. I'm happy to share today my own observations of juggling a very busy career as well as a busy family life. And as with any kind of family environment, these are my personal observations. And obviously families are made up of different dynamics. So hopefully one or two of the tips might help you along the way today. So it might help you to understand myself a little bit and my family life and my career life. I have two children, 14 and 18. In about 2005, I had my first daughter, and I had very little help at home. The children's father was working away most of the time, and I had long periods of time at home on my own. Sometimes 24/7 for weeks on end. And I found that very difficult where I was at home with a small baby all the time. And I made a very personal decision that I would return to work after 6 months and I would, put my child into childcare alongside other children. And I found that this gave me two things personally. So a sense of self. I felt much happier as I had a balance between my parental responsibilities and my personal aspirations. But also I found for my child, they actually blossomed with the social interactions that they found at nursery and obviously subsequently at school. At the time, my career was unstable. I didn't really have a profession. So I made the decision when talking to my employer that I wanted to become a HR professional. And they actually actively supported me. They were very entrepreneurial as a business. And I completed my postgraduate diploma. Oddly, at the same time, I then had my son. So I was finishing my postgrad, working full time and pregnant and had a small baby. In hindsight, it was madness, but it was something that I was wanting to do and was working to manage that balance. So role-wise, I started off working low-level influence as a leader, and slowly over the years, I've worked in C-suites for SMEs, and then I've moved into global organizations where I'm leading large regional functions to deliver, functional output for HR specifically. So here are some of my observations that I've made along the way. I think absolutely believe in your own capabilities. As a mother, as a worker, as a leader, there will be times when all of those capabilities are challenged. And I think it's very important that you keep your aspirations for your family, aspirations for your career, very clearly in focus. And I think it's key to keep that belief in your own capabilities. There will be times when you're challenged and it will affect your self-worth on occasions. And I think it's important to understand that sometimes the environment is wrong. So I had a situation where I wasn't necessarily being recognised for the competence that I had in a specific area, and I felt my career was being held back, and I had a choice to work with the employer or to go and have the discussion and look elsewhere. So keep the belief in your capabilities and be confident to evidence how you can bring value both into the home and at work. And also have a view on what's important to you as a parent and your capabilities as a parent. There are many views on what parenting looks like. You know your family, you know your children. So have the belief in what's right for you and your family. So believe in yourself and trust your judgment and your capabilities. I think one of the things that I've realized is I can't have it all. There's a lot of pressure on us to prove we can do everything, maintain a home, maintain a family, maintain our relationships, maintain our friendships, build a career. There are compromises that need to be made, and they need to be made along the way. And I think, as with any relationship or any career, you have to decide what's important for you. And sometimes there are tough decisions to be made. And I think what I found is that you need to decide where you want to put your energy and your time. And you have to decide, as your children grow older, that compromise may change. So to be challenged at work was one of the decisions I made. And that meant that I then had to ensure that, to be dedicated to my children, that they would have a stable mother, which meant I was happier by being at work. So in practice, that meant that I had to decide what events I went to at school, what events I attended at nursery, and what was important at that time. So prioritize. And that priority may change depending, as I say, on the period and the maturity of the children. So there are sometimes tough decisions that need to be made, and there are compromises that need to be made as well. And how have I managed it? I think planning. I think to manage a tough work schedule, to deliver at work, and also to be there for your children, you need to have a clear schedule, and you need to understand how you want to split your time. I think often in work it's a little bit easier to be organized because there are deadlines, there's an expected output, you understand the immediate priorities and the challenges. And understanding how to then fit that around work is all about understanding, again, about where the balance of time should be spent. So I would often have conversations with the children about, well, what after school clubs did they want to do? We couldn't do everything, so how do we prioritize that time? And so it was very important for me that I built in time with the children so that they felt a priority, and that they had that love and that time with myself so that they could blossom during that period. And then they had their own activities and their own focuses. So the balance wasn't always right, but we seem to have managed it so far. And I think when we talk about aspirations, communicate with your employer. Communicate what your aspirations are. I've been very lucky that I've found myself with great employers who were very flexible, but some of that was down to myself as a worker. I understood that I needed to deliver against my results. I needed to make sure that I took pride in my objectives and achieving those. And so by being an impactful worker, I was able, when I needed the flexibility, to then have those conversations to say, hey, look, this deadline's on this day, but I need to go out to my children's nursery for 2.5 hours to see a Christmas play, and I'll be back and I will deliver against these objectives. And then I did exactly that. So it's about building in that flexibility in order that you can manage your objectives that you have. So your family objective of being there for your children, but also the work objective of delivering whatever activity or priorities in front of you on that day. And I think I heard recently Mark Randolph, obviously the CEO of Netflix, talk about how he managed the priorities as they grew that business. And he talked about how on a Tuesday night was his date night with his wife, and there was no non-negotiables, and he stuck to that religiously. And I believe they've been married 30 years now. So I think it's that type of understanding when you've made compromise, but also being communicating that with your employer about what are your non-negotiables. And there are some times when deadlines and those non-negotiables collide, and it's having those discussions that are really important. And also communicating with your children, helping them understand why you're working hard, helping them understand how you can manage the balance of their needs and their time, and how you can be there for them. And talking through the tough decisions. I did found normally there were periods in the school year where there were lots of activities, and sometimes they're in the middle of the day. And sometimes when they're in the middle of the day, it's really hard to step outside of the workplace and be there. So sometimes what I would do is I'd sit with the children and say, hey, look, here's the calendar of what the school's got going on. Where would you like me to come along? And we would have those discussions. And actually now what I'm learning is that's a life skill that I've taught my children, especially my daughter who's now at college, because she's having to make priority decisions and think about what's most important for her during her studies. social life or, continuing to study. So I do think, although I didn't realize it at the time, it's actually a life decision to talk through, how decisions are made and why they're made. And then ask for help. No one can do this alone, whether you're at work and you've got lots of priorities to deliver, whether it's home and you've got the balance of childcare, working and managing a home and working with your family to do that. So spread the load. This shouldn't all fall on one person. So asking for help is really, really important. And I think, those challenges come in different forms when you need that help. And I think that I was lucky at the time that my parents wished to be quite active, as well as, all of the children's grandparents, but that they weren't local to me. But I would utilize and speak to them about, hey, the summer holidays are coming. Can you have them for a week? And then the children would go and have lots of love from grandparents, and it would free me up then to obviously focus on work. And so then when I took the time off with my own children, then I would have capacity to concentrate because I'd actually met all my deadlines. So it's about understanding, what does help look like for you? For me personally, it was helping during those really difficult periods when there's long holidays and there's needing support then. And also having the opportunity comes as your career grows. At the time when they were younger, the responsibility to maintain the home and the children and work was falling on me. As my career has grown, I've been able financially, to invest perhaps in a cleaner. And that's something that is my luxury. I don't really go out very much, but that's my choice. So there are different things come as your career grows, and your opportunities to gain support comes as your career grows at the same time. And also ask your children and teach them some life skills. I think the other thing that they can do is help around the house, and it teaches them how to take responsibility and take accountability. So actually asking them to help with the family dynamic is also crucial. And I think visibility, when we talk about visibility, I mean visibility to your children, but also visibility at work when you're wanting to grow your career. Especially as you work your way up to the C-suite and into the leadership positions that you aspire to, I think you need to build a really strong internal network. I think with key advocates, really you need to build that confidence where people will talk about you when you're not in the room, and they will promote you and they will advocate for you for the next high visibility project. So careers are built on those who promote you. Be involved in those high visibility projects. Give yourself some strong strength and impact. Demonstrate your knowledge, your professional capabilities, and also help others to understand what you want from your career, what you expect from your career, and also deliver against those wants and needs when you've been given the opportunity. And really, very much and most important is, don't burn out. When I talk about you can't have it all, I think you also have to recognize when you need to take time for yourself. I think it's really essential to set yourself a realistic expectation of how much you can deliver in a day. And I think you have to understand when to switch off. And, my personal well-being is I'll take a walk. And actually, I think I'm most creative when I'm walking and I'm thinking over the day. And actually, I find that I solve lots of problems when I'm out walking. So not only am I away from the desk, but I'm actually coming up with solutions to problems that I've perhaps faced during the working day. And actually use that time that you're taking care of yourself potentially to have your children with you. So some of the hardest family challenges I've ever had, I've solved while driving the car, because it's dedicated time with the children. And it means that I can discuss any challenges they might have had at school, and we can work through them together. So think about the tools and strategies that work for you. For me, obviously, it's going for walks and sometimes dragging the children along so they have to talk to me along the way, is another way of building in time with them. But ultimately, to be successful at home and to be successful in work, you need to look after yourself, and you need to have the visibility both at home and at work. So that means planning in time and planning in a schedule and prioritizing what's important to you, but also communicating with your family and asking for that help. So I hope that gave some overview of myself, obviously what I've learned along the way. And I don't know if there's any opportunity to ask any questions.
There is an opportunity to ask questions. Thank you so much, Helen. We actually have questions from the audience, but I want to thank you for this really interesting presentation, for sharing your personal story, your personal journey, many aspects related where for me I could relate to them. I want to ask you a couple of questions. Here we actually have from the audience. I had one question from myself, but let's take from the audience first.
Perfect.
What type of me time activities do you suggest?
I think it really depends on who you are as a person. I can't sit inside for very long. I have to be outdoors. You know, I've made the decision to live in the countryside, so I'm out walking the dog. And I think that's very important for me. I think for other people, it might be reading books, painting. I think ultimately it's getting time where you don't have to think about anything else but yourself. I think sometimes we have to be very selfish as a mother to say, I actually don't need to think about children, because there's a lot of pressure on us to think about everything we have to do during the day to get them out the door and ourselves at the same time.
Yeah, totally. Can relate. Have you ever faced any discrimination or bias in your career due to being a mother? If so, how have you responded to these challenges? By Miranda Miller.
Yeah, so I had one situation where one of my children was sick when they were quite young, but they were at the stage that age when they could sit in front of the television and just sort of, I just needed to be there to monitor them, but I was still able to work from home. And there was a discussion about, was I actually working from home and, you know, when my children's sick. I find sometimes just being an open and honest person and just having an open discussion with my employer or my line manager, whoever that was at the time, to say, hey, look, you know, this is what I delivered while I was there. Please don't be concerned. This is how I managed those dual responsibilities. I would say that's probably the most concern I've ever experienced. I don't know if I've been lucky, but I've had a good go so far.
Thank you. How often do we need to discuss these issues with our kids, do you think? By Christine Spencer.
Yeah, I think obviously that depends on the child and the age of the child. And also I think what they're experiencing at the time. Again, you know, I talk about transparency. I believe that's one of my greatest traits. I'm openly, actively honest with my children. You know, when there was this challenge, I never forget, there were about 3 things in the same week at the school, and there was just no way I could have gone to all 3. And I had to sit down and explain, you know, it wasn't that I didn't want to go, but it wasn't possible, and these are the reasons why. So I think you probably know your children well enough on how much you need to explain and how much you need to have the discussion. But typically I would have it when it was needed.
Yeah, great. What was the toughest compromise you had to make as a working mother? By Angelina, from Angelina.
Oh, what a really good question. I think sometimes we all know there's a time at work when you just can't leave and you have to finish the job you're doing. And I think that guilt, mum guilt, sometimes can come in and you think, oh, I've got to go, but I've also got there's a priority at work that's really dependent upon me. And I think that's the toughest compromise, when you know you'd rather be somewhere else, but you've got a responsibility that you've chosen for yourself and you have to finish. So I think it's that understanding you can't have it all, and how you then make up for those compromises. So, for example, if I did have to stay later at work because there was something really important, I would always try to make sure that weekend that then my dead time was dedicated to the children. So I've always tried to juggle making up where perhaps I felt I wasn't able to give back during the week.
Would you call that a balance?
I would call it trying to do a balancing act. You know,
yeah.
The weekends are for children, not for work. So I will do my best not to do anything at the weekends.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much, Helen.
Thank
you for answering the question. Thank you for the presentation. It totally resonated with us. There were so many questions, and I'm sure it will be super useful to everyone who will watch it also later, and to everyone who joined us. Let's thank, please, Helen, for being with us, and see you at our future events.
Thank you
so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.